What's going on, guys? Um, let's talk about an interesting topic. Sponge filter versus the hang on the back filter. Pros and cons. Which one is better than the other one? I think this is a good topic because a lot of people will run sponge filters, or a lot of people will run on hang on the back filters. And seeing that I went through so many hang on the back filters and the issues that I have been going through because of them, we can talk about the good old sponge filter and the benefits of this. Let's start with the sponge filter. The pros of the sponge filter. Don't mind the tank right there. It is pretty much quarantining right now for ick. So, what are the pros of a sponge filter? Well, number one, is very easy to install. It doesn't really take much to install one. So, right, most sponge filters will look just like this, and they'll come with a little device that attaches to the top, and that's pretty much it. This is all that it is. Well, of course, you need a air stone with a lining and an air pump to be able to use this, but it is a lot more easier than your hang on the back filter. So pro number one, it's easy to install, easy to set up, and it's completely quiet. This is pretty much for biological filtration. Is pretty much going to help grow and house your beneficial bacteria, and it's going to live within inside of this and keep your fish alive and your water levels to where it's supposed to be. The second pro to this is your fish can't get sucked up by it, your shrimps can't get sucked up by it, your snails can't get attached to this. So that's a beneficial faction to your tank, because you ever come down to your basement or your fish room or wherever you're keeping your tanks and witness one of your fish attached to the intake of the filtration, or your shrimps, maybe you're breeding, those can be issues for your tank having a hang on the back filter. And that's one of the pros to this. Also, it gives your fish a hiding spot. Your fish can hide behind it or underneath it here, and that's beneficial for your fish, because it'll make them feel safe. Second, this is a food supplies. For your snails, your fish, your shrimps, your frogs, anything that you have in the tank, living within your tank, can eat the leftover foods and algae and slime that's on top of this, which is beneficial to your tank because you have 24 hours of feeding live directly inside of your tank. For an example, we look at the 29-gallon tall tank, which has amazingly fish disappeared from it. I mean, literally disappeared. Like, see my Sarpei Tetra? His brothers and sisters, gone, vanished. It's going through a light issue. My girlfriend dropped the light inside of the tank, which now I'm just running this for the meantime. But let's take a look at it right here, right? You can kind of see little particles all over it. I gave it a squeezing, so you don't see too much of it. But my plecoses will actually head over to it and suck on it, and they'll get all the good stuff out of it. You're going to get a continual flow of bubbles like this that will cause motion at the surface of your tank, which creates oxygen for your fish inside of the water. So that's another beneficial factor compared to hang on a back filter, where it's going to get clogged because of the gunk and all the other issues that it will have, and create less bubble flow. Sponge filters and any type of sponge in your tank will house a lot of beneficial bacteria. You can cut this into multiple pieces. It's easier to transfer into other tanks. Just taking one of these and squeezing it into another tank with another sponge filter it'll pretty much start the cycle on your tank 100%, because it's already housing your beneficial bacteria. To where a hang on a back filter, you have to unplug it, disconnect it, transfer it, and so on, so much forth. This is a lot easier to manage and take care of and keep clean. Now, the cons of the sponge filter. What are the cons? Well, it can't hold ammonia, and it can't pick up waste like poop and fish food and things like that. Yes, things can get stuck on it, or if you have bigger pores on your sponge filter, it can absorb some of that stuff, but it's just going to be trapping it on the inner side or into these creases, so on and so forth. So that's a con, because your water changes are going to have to increase depending on how many fish you have, how big the fish are, how much you have to feed, and the amount of waste the fish are creating in the tank. For an example, on this tank, we're having issues with the hang on the back filter, so I'm running 2 sponge filters. And I forgot about a pro. A lot of these sponge filters, they actually come like this, and then you can build inside of them multiple different chambers and create beneficial bacteria in many different ways. If you see, you got some gravel, some bioballs, sponge, another type of sponge, air bubble, and it's going to create that surface movement just like this one is. So that's another pro to sponge filters. But yeah. So the cons would pretty much be that. See the cloudiness of this tank? Sometimes the sponge filter cannot clear that cloudiness because you might not have the carbon or anything like that inside of your tank. But to be honest, you're gonna have less cons with the sponge filter than you are with a hang on a back filter. These are a lot more easier, and they last for years and years and years and years. So that's another pro. I just have more pros than I do have cons. And my only con of this is that it won't get rid of high levels of ammonia, and it won't pick up fish waste and fish food. But that's easy issues. It just means you're doing water changes a little bit more than you would, or you're doing bigger water changes than what you normally would with a hang on the back filter. Now let's go on to the hang on the back filter. The pros to a hang on the back filter is, number one, you have the cartridge in there, which is something like this, and it's usually filled with carbon that helps get rid of ammonia, pick up fish waste and food, and also if you're medicating a tank, your hang on the back filter can be used to get rid of that medicine in the tank. Instead of doing huge water changes over and over and over again to get rid of the medicines in the tank, you pop a few of these in and you can get rid of the harmful medicines that you're using to kill parasites, like I'm killing it inside of this tank, or other sorts of medicines. Another pro is, if the inside of the hang on the back filter is large enough, you can build many different types of media levels in here, right? So this one is off right now due to medicating this tank. I got the cartridge here, and I have a sponge filter with some bioballs and other sorts of beneficial bacteria housing in there. Sponges and things like that. So that's a good pop y'all up there. A good thing for hang on the back filters. Also, the intake, the thing that you use to suck up the water, you can change those and design your own one where the intake itself, I was looking for the intake somewhere. I paused the video, but I don't know where my extra ones are at. So you can change those. The other beneficial to them is you can control the flow of how fast it's sucking up water and how fast it's spitting out water by creating your own barriers, or some of them come with a valve on the top where you can control how much water is being sucked up or not. Now, I don't really have too many other pros for it that I can think of. Now, the cons are they can suck up your fish, shrimps if you're breeding. They break constantly. You're always having to disconnect them, turning them off, and cleaning them out, because if you leave them for too long, the amount of gunk will destroy the motor, the propeller, just a bunch of issues you'll get from them. Also, they can kill your fish. If you don't clean them on time, all the ammonia that's sitting inside of this eventually starts to leak back inside of your tank, and the ammonia spikes levels will go crazy, and you can lose your entire fish tank because of it. It can stop sucking up a lot of the water. Like, I struggle with this one over here. So this one over here, you see the amount of flow? That's because this tubing here is either clogged with gunk and food and other things like that, or like leaves, like you see that one there, up in there, and it goes into this propeller that's hanging roughly in there, not allowing enough water to be sucked up. And then when it overspills, it's just not enough flow. Also, seeing this area, I just cleaned this a couple of days ago, so it's not as bad, but you already see how slow the flow is. That can get gunked up with all types of stuff and then stop your tank from working. So what's the solution? Which one works better than the other? I like to run both. I like to put sponge filters and the hang-on back filters into my tanks. As you can see here, I have the sponge filter and a hang-on back filter. Now, the problem is maintenance, pretty much keeping up and upgrading your equipment. Sponge filters, you're never really having to upgrade them unless you want a bigger one for more beneficial bacteria. Like in this tank, I can easily pop that one off, toss this one on, and this one is good for anywhere from 60 to 100 gallon tank, where that one's only beneficial for 5 to 10 gallons of water, pretty much. So the sponge filter is definitely the winner. You can do a lot more with them. They're more beneficial to your tank, especially if you're breeding, housing plants, or anything like that. It won't disrupt the surface of the water. Like filters in this tank, for an example, when this filter is running, it disturbs the soil, pushing the sand that way and this way, causing plants to uproot. That's another con. So yeah, guys, the winner of this pretty much is a sponge filter. I believe the sponge filters are better than hang on the back filters. Just especially in my experience, I've been having a lot of issues with hang on the back filters, but I prefer to run both of them at the exact same time, so that if I do have issues with the hang on the back filter, I have the backup sponge filter. These things are pretty much good. You get yourself a 10-gallon tank, a 5-gallon tank, pop a few of these in there, like one live one, like just taking out one existing one that's already in a tank, putting it in a 10-gallon tank, and then pretty much tossing in 8 of these, right? And every future tank that you start up, you now have a full cycle tank filled with beneficial water. Also, if you're breeding, you just pop one out. These things are good for hospital tanks and quarantine tanks. Compared to hang on a back filter, you can only run 1 or 2 of those on a tank at once. Unless you want it surrounded with a bunch of these hang on the back filters all around the tank, it's gonna look crazy. And then switching that back and forth, having to plug it up and all that stuff, where this, you could just sit in some water, pop some airline tubing in it, or what is that called? An air pump or water pump, and there you go. It'll even show you on the box 2 different ways where you can run it. The one to the left is a water pump, and the one to the right is an air pump, and it shows you how it pulls up and the difference that it does for your tank. I didn't want this video to be that long, but hey, 15 minutes. Thank you for viewing. Subscribe, like, comment. Tell me what you think is a good source of filtration. We're definitely in the future going to be running some canisters with some sponge filters, so that's going to be really good. Sponges are just really good for everything. And the one pro that I did leave out on the hang in the back filter, if you get yourself some regular sponging like this, you can actually cut a hole in it and put that around your intake.